Welcome to Generations, a show which helps people 50 and better lead happy, healthy, and productive lives. Here's today's moderator, Nadia Giordana.
Hello and welcome to Generations. I'm Nadia Giordana. Co-hosting with me today, first off, we have Gloria Van Demeltrot.
Thank you, Nadia. I'm delighted to be here and eager to hear what our guest has to say.
It's fun to have you here.
Thank you.
And Jeff DeZeller.
Well, thank you, Nadia. I'm really excited about today's show and looking forward to meeting our guest.
I think it's going to be great. We also have Midge Bubani. Welcome, Midge.
Thank you. This is my first as a co-host, and I'm very excited about that and excited to meet our guest today.
We're happy to have you here, too.
Thank you.
And we have a very special guest today, Donna Chicone. And Donna, you're a pet expert. I think the name of your book is, I'm going from memory, but How to Be a Super Pet Parent. Is that correct?
Being a super pet parent.
Being a super pet parent. I wanted to get that right. Thank you for being on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to our discussion about seniors and pets, and specifically dogs.
Wonderful. Donna, I'll start us off by asking the first question. I think it's obvious that you have a passion about being a pet parent, and I'm wondering how you decided to distribute that information by writing a book. What made you decide to write that book?
That is the question I get asked all the time, and I think such a timely one for me always. I never find it a question. I mean, actually, I always want to answer that question. I think it's very important. I had a pet dog named Breezer. And I had Breezer for about 9 or 10 years. I was working full time, and I loved Breezer. I fed him, I cared for him, but I truly didn't develop a really deep relationship with him, or really a relationship other than enjoying him pretty much. I always define it as at my convenience. When I was able to have time or make time for Breezer, that's when he got time with me. When I brought Jazz, my next dog, into my life, I experienced something very different. The world around me was different. People who had dogs were talking differently about them. Vets were talking differently about them. Breeders, trainers. There seemed to be a movement that was underway to make the world a better place, to get more information to people about dogs in a way I hadn't experienced before. And I decided I wanted to be a part of that movement. And one thing led to another, and soon I had a TV show about dogs. And this book is really a direct extension of the TV show. My intention with the TV show was to bring information to people to help them be able to make different decisions with their dogs, and maybe even sometimes better ones. And the book is also an extension of that. And I feel that when with Jazz and then Jive, my second dog coming into my life, I was more intentional about my relationship with them, and I was more focused on really wanting to build that relationship. I was able to experience so much love and so much joy and so much peace just being with them. I mean, I just enjoy every single little moment. I love it when my dog Jazz walks by me and nudges my leg with his nose to say, "You're my buddy, you're my partner."
Was part of that difference because you had changed? Or did it have something to do with the dogs, too?
Well, I think I was influenced by the change happening around me. And I think I changed in that respect. I became more open. I'm sure that, and that's what I saw happening to a lot of people, looking at dogs. You know, we often have talked about dogs as we're the owner. And when you think about owning an object, and for years people used to think dogs didn't have feelings, that most animals were objectified. Even in our grammar, when I wrote my book, I would be corrected by my computer and the software I was in to refer to a dog as it or that, not he or she. So when we think of ourselves as the owner, we think of the dog as an object. It just makes it on some level less likely that we would really delve into a more intense relationship with them. And it also makes it, I think, on some level a little easier to give them away, turn them into a shelter, you know, but when you think of yourself as a pet parent, and you think about really intentional relationship with a dog, there's a whole lot of different things that happen in that capacity that really build a relationship with your dog that makes you more inclined to think of them not as a human child, but as an absolute member of the family.
Donna, to follow up on that, I looked at your website, which was an excellent website, and you mentioned the term sentient. I had to look that up, but apparently it has to do with feeling or having feelings. And could you elaborate on that a little bit in terms of sort of personifying your pets or one's pets?
Yes, I would. There is a difference. We tend to want to do what I call humanizing dogs. We tend to want to, because we don't speak their language, they don't speak ours, we know how to raise a human child, and so when we're relating to our dogs, sometimes we humanize them, and we think, well, why aren't you responding to me? You should like this. But they're a dog, they're not a human, so we need to know those differences. The sentient piece, Jeff, is so important. As I said a bit ago, for years and years we didn't think of dogs as having feelings. But they do. They feel joy, they feel fear, they feel pain.
They feel sadness.
They feel sadness, they feel shame, they feel love, they feel. And they also are very bright. They're able to rationally think things through. The average dog is about as bright as a 2.5 to 3-year-old toddler in the respect of being able to reason.
That's pretty smart.
Make sense of things. But they also instinctively, I think dogs on a intuitive level are able to tune into, you've heard stories and seen, perhaps know people who maybe the dog gets lost and is gone for years but ends up coming back to their home because they know how to get back eventually. Somebody who they're bonded with dies and they are there, all the time. We are able to train our dogs today to seek out diabetes, seizures, cancer. Their noses are so good, and their ability to hone in on something is so accurate that we train them to seek out all those things. And along with the sentient quality, training is imperative, Jeff. When we didn't think dogs had feelings, we were far more aggressive in our training with them, and we would use more negative, I call them negative training techniques that would inflict pain to teach the dog how to do something. Now we are really focused on only using positive training techniques to really respect the sentient aspect of these beautiful beings, but also their ability to learn. I would much rather want to respond to a treat, a kind word, or a loving pet than a prong collar or a shock.
Like a person would.
Exactly, because they do feel. They feel fear, they feel pain, so they're going to have those similar responses.
You have quite a comprehensive book. You cover all aspects of pet care. I almost said ownership, but it's not, it's not ownership. And one of the things that struck me is how we were taught to train our dog and what to feed our dog was totally different from what you're saying. Like we have an invisible fence, and of course you have the shock collar, which we only had to use once. But we thought we were doing the right thing and all that. The food thing, maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Nutrition.
How we were taught to only give your dog one kind of kibble their whole life and not change it or they'd get sick. And the way you talk about in your book about feeding other, like human grade food.
Right. It's such a good point. But when you think about the progression of dog food, when we were taught to give our dogs dog food early on, dog food evolved after World War I, I think, where they made the wet dog food. And then it was only, I think, about 20 or 30 years ago that we got the dry dog food, and now it's freeze-dried, and it's just, when you think, I talk in my book about if I got a cup of Cheerios 3 times a day, twice a day, every day for my whole life.
It'd be pretty boring.
Wouldn't that be awful? No matter how nutritional it was, wouldn't that be awful? And so what the research has shown today is that dogs really need 2 basic things: a very well-balanced diet and variety. Because if you do eat the same thing, eventually there's a compromise that can occur in the immune system. And then we see dogs itching and scratching. And your vet, the very first thing your vet will likely say to you if you bring a scratchy dog in is, let's look at the food. Let's change the food. So sometimes not, but many times that's the case. So really feeding your dog, nutrition for dogs today can be controversial. There's some people who believe just dog food from dog food companies is good. And then there's another group of people who have been researching it for a while who think that the components of dog food from dog food companies may not be the level of healthy components that we would like to see our dogs eat. And so they look more organic. Some people look to raw, which is still pre-made many times. And then you can do a variation of it. I do feed my dogs a very good high-grade dry kibble, but they get a very small amount of it. And what they get a lot of is fresh vegetables and fresh fruit. And they love kale, they love broccoli sprouts, they love blueberries and bananas. And there are foods you definitely don't want to give your dog. I talk about those too. You don't want to give them grapes or raisins of any kind. Macadamia nuts, there's a whole list of avocados, there's a whole list of foods dogs should not have. They can be very, very toxic or harmful for them.
Have you included that in your book?
Yes. There's a list of that. A list of foods they shouldn't have is in my book. And a list of what they can have is in the book.
I have a question. Since our audience is primarily senior citizens, how would a dog fit into the life of a senior citizen, and what kind of things should they consider if they're going to bring a dog into their life?
I think that really is not that different from anybody looking at bringing a dog into their life. When Jazz and Jive leave me, I'm senior now, but I will truly be senior, and I will be looking for the oldest dog in the rescue shelter to bring home to live out his life or her life with the two of us together. And I don't think that that's all. I would recommend that for seniors. If we can rescue another senior, I think that's wonderful. I think bringing a young puppy into
That would be chaotic, wouldn't it?
That be a lot of work? Puppies, I've had 2 puppies, 9 weeks on, and 1 human child. And I'll take the human child any day. Much less work, much less work. So maybe rescuing a senior dog would be good.
Say, Donna, again, considering a senior person that may be looking at getting a pet, I've been a pet parent. I used to be a pet owner, but now I'm a pet parent, I realize, for many decades, cats as it were. But cats cost money. And when cats get sick, they can cost a lot of money when you go to the vet. In terms of talking to someone that's considering getting a pet, that's obviously a major point, is how much is it going to cost? Can I afford this? Because we've been through a few things in our family with pets recently, and it's frankly into the thousands. So what would you recommend to someone so that they realize they can handle a pet, as opposed to getting into it and the first vet visit or whatever, they realize they can't
handle it.
A very sad
It's an important
situation is
consideration.
realizing you can't afford to keep your dog or your cat. Yeah, so it's very important. And that also is a prerequisite for everybody who's looking at bringing an animal into their life. It's very, very important that you allow for a savings, because that's the kind of expenditure you don't anticipate.
Or insurance. I've heard of insurance.
Can be helpful.
Would that help?
Insurance can be helpful. They're getting better. I think you either want to have a couple $1,000s available or a few $1,000s available if possible, or insurance to help you through any traumatic, especially if you are bringing a senior dog into your life. You may have more issues. Bring a dog who has needs, because dogs vary. There's no 2 dogs alike. There's no 2 humans alike. There's no 2 animals alike of any kind. We each have our own individual personalities, and we all have our own individual needs. If you are a large dog, like a Great Dane, that may not be the best choice for somebody who's a senior in a confined or smaller living space. Then you may want to look at a more medium or smaller sized dog.
Because of the amount of exercise and care that dog would probably need, is that right?
Right. But also, if you have a very small space, it's just hard to have a very large dog.
Yeah.
It's just not that easy for everybody. But it can be done. It can be done if it has to be. Also, it's important to realize the activity level, as you mentioned. Do you have some space that you can take the dog out to exercise, eliminate, go to the bathroom, as well as do some walking or some running?
Or a fenced backyard if you're still in a home?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That is perfect, to have a fenced backyard. So you want to look at the needs of the breed. Is this a breed that demands a lot of exercise? Is this a breed that's kind of a couch potato? You know, because they all have different needs as they vary. My 2 dogs are working dogs. They're working breeds. They went to sea with a Portuguese fisherman. They were a live working piece of equipment. They worked the nets in the sea. They actually swam and herded fish into the nets. When they took messages from boat to boat and boat to shore, before radar, when the fisherman would take the catch in to sell, the dog would guard the equipment in the boat, and they always left one at home to guard the family because they're a watchdog. These dogs are not hyper with energy, but they have a lot of stamina energy. And when they work all the time. So my dogs have to be walked. They have to be exercised. They need a job. Yeah. They would get so frustrated if they didn't have something meaningful to look forward to. They both do therapy work. They both do nose work. I find jobs for them around the house. I've trained them to bring their toys in when they take them out. They really have to have things to do. If you get a small little Yorkie, you know, you may not have to do that much work with them.
So the smaller breeds, are they less work? I'm not a dog or pet parent at this point in time. I have been a long time ago, and I look forward to the idea of maybe having a pet at some point in the future. But are smaller breeds less work intensive?
Smaller breeds eat less. When they eliminate it smaller. They take up less space.
Okay.
If you groom them and brush them, there's less to do that too. But the universal need that every dog has is to be trained.
Do you recommend a dog be trained, but are there scenarios where the pet parent can do the training, or is it always going to be an outside person that's a professional trainer?
Well, first of all, it's a dog's right, and it's our pet parent responsibility to provide them with training. And the reason for that is they know how to live in a dog world, but they don't know what's expected of them in our world. And it's really utmost important that we take that seriously and teach them how to live comfortably in our world. And no matter how you do the training, if you bring in a trainer, which is becoming quite the trend these days, I understand, where you hire a trainer and bring them in to come to you, they're still teaching you how to train your dog. And if you go to a class, you get the benefit of being with your dog in a more social environment, so your dog is getting exposed to being around other dogs and may develop more comfort. That socialization to other dogs and other humans is very important for all dogs. But you're still learning from that instructor, that trainer, how to train your dog at home. You know, somebody can really initially teach you how to tell your dog to sit. But unless you do it every day, I say every single day, I ask my dogs for a sit, a stay, a leave it, a come, pause up, off. And they do those, they respond with those behaviors every single day to me. So those are just absolute givens. I just look at them or say the word softly and they do it because it's repeatedly asked of them every day. So if you train a dog to sit and never ask them for that behavior ever again, they'll never really retain it. So.
You talked, Donna, about breeds, different breeds. There are large breeds and small and every size in between. What about crossbreeding? I had a poodle at one time years ago. I've been a pet parent to many, many, many animals, but I had one who had hip issues. Is that something? that happens with some breeds? Is it poor breeding, or could you just talk about that and mongrel types or
Yeah,
mixed breeds?
I even reference that in my book, Gloria. That is something that if a breeder is breeding responsibly should never happen.
The hip dysplasia.
Hip dysplasia can totally be avoided.
Right.
At 2 years of age, dogs are brought in from the litter. At 2 years of age, my dogs were both x-rayed. Hips were x-rayed and elbows were x-rayed to determine if that dog was breedable or not. And if an irresponsible breeder chooses not to do that and breeds to a dog that's going to promote hip dysplasia, then you're going to have, that's totally on the breeder. Totally on the breeder, not the breed or the dog.
How do you identify a good breeder?
Right, yeah.
That's
Well,
a good point.
You know, excellent question. You really need to, I think, do some reading ahead of time, a book like mine, or just get any information about how to identify a good breeder, and go in and ask those questions. How long have you been breeding? Why do you breed? Can I see where your dogs are bred? Can I see where your dogs live? Can you show me the father and the mother? Because sometimes the breeding, you know, the sire may be way on the other side of the country, so you want to see pictures then if you can't see the dog. So it's really helpful to get coached and learn it a little bit about how to ask them questions. And you will be able to tell if that breeder is in it for the money or is in it for the love of the breed. And that was actually when I did my TV show, that was one of my criteria when I had a breeder on. I interviewed them and made sure that they were coming on my show to talk about a breed that they loved. And my message to them was, I want you to tell our viewers what it is about this breed that you are so in love with. What is it that has totally captured you to the point where you want to continue bringing this breed into the world?
Can you tell the differences between dogs that are mixed breed or purebred dogs? Is there a difference? Are they smarter than the other kinds, or is there something because there are lots of mixed breed dogs out there?
You know, if you have a poodle and you have a golden retriever, you know, people may breed those, or you get a shelter dog that has 3 or 4 different breeds in it, it's helpful to know a little bit about each breed, because some of those behaviors may turn up in that dog's behavior. There's nothing right or good or bad about a mixed breed or a purebred. They're dogs, and they're going to have health issues, and they're going to have, some are going to have more than others. Some will have none or very few, whether they're purebred or mixed. It really doesn't matter. But I think the important thing is, if you understand the different breed influences on your dog, you'll be better able to understand your dog's needs and enjoy your dog. For example, if you have a border collie mix, a border collie and a German shepherd, and maybe there's something else thrown in there, if you don't understand that that border collie is a working dog, it hurts. I mean, I have friends with, and I think border collies have the most beautiful bodies. You know, you see them reaching for frisbees, and these are a very, very active dog, and they're very bright. They train very quickly. They learn things. But if you don't know some of the basic, you know, oh, I always wanted to border. Do you know the energy level of that dog? Do you know how much work it is to keep a border collie entertained and exercised?
Which might not be a good dog for a senior.
Right.
Exactly.
Or maybe
So-
not the best dog. It depends on the senior.
So really learning about the breeds, even if it's a mixed breed, all those influences are there.
It's important to do your research
Right.
to find out what they're like and how much activity level they need, and
And also, some breeds are more prone to illnesses
yes.
and others aren't. So it's really good to know, anticipate all of that, so you can be prepared financially, be prepared emotionally to be able to deal with, you know, meet your dog's needs.
And the average length of life of a dog, so that you can kind of know how long your dog is
Sure.
going to be with you.
Exactly, and the sort of the rule of thumb is, the smaller the breed, the longer the lifespan. The larger the breed, the shorter the
Oh,
lifespan.
that's interesting to
A
know.
Great Dane will live maybe 7, 8, 9 years, whereas a smaller breed like a Yorkie or a Dachshund can live much longer. I have a friend who has a Dachshund who's 19 years old.
Oh my.
And on that note, I need to cut in. We are going to take a momentary break, look at a clip produced by our producer, and then we'll be back to say goodbye.
I am a dog lover, and I've been one most of my life. When I was 4, I figured the best way to get a puppy was to beg my parents for a baby brother, and it worked. When I was in 3rd grade, a classmate told me his dog had more fur on one side than the other. I said, "Oh yeah? Which side is that?" And he said, "The outside." In that regard, outside of a dog, a book can be man's best friend. But inside of a dog, it's too dark to read. Dogs are nearly perfect pets. They're playful and friendly, although, whoops, when you take them to public places, just be sure to follow the ground rules. Dogs are tuned into others of their kind by smell, sight, and sound. When they live in separate yards and one dog barks, so does the one nearby, then the next one, and so on. A single bark can set off secondary, tertiary, and quaternary waves of barking before it leaves our auditory range. But who is to say this eruption of arfing ever ends? Dogs have much more acute hearing than people do, and of course some breeds bark much more loudly than others. So if you were to acquire just the right breed of dog, there could in theory be only 6 pedigrees of separation between you and Kevin Bacon.
Wasn't that fun? It was fun to watch. And thank you, Gloria and Jeff, for being here today. Midge and Donna, especially you. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you. Dogs are so wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity to just talk about
Perfect. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time on Generations.